You may recall in Employee Setup, we have this function that says Schedule. And within here, this applies to the preferred schedule for this given employee. So selecting on this, for example, I can identify within here specifically for Joe Driver what hours he wants to work, what hours he does not want to work, and what hours he cannot work. Now this is specific to him. Underneath this, I also have hours preferred. Joe prefers to work 40 hours per week, and his skill level on a scale of 1 to 10 is around a level 8. Now, taking this information, it is now pulled across to the next thing we're going to take a look at, which is employee schedule. The first window that shows up here is the date selection, and so within here you can select any date on any week. By default, a scheduled shift is 1 week or 7 days. And within this, you can choose any day of any one of these. If I was to choose, for example, the 26th of August, okay, so that is next week from the current date, then I will be setting up the schedule for next week. What I have now is the employee schedule screen. You'll see within here there's all kinds of information. So what we're going to do is just kind of take a look at some of the main things. The first thing we have across the top is this yellow bar, which is a taskbar, and in here I have all of the basic functions that you can perform on the system. Underneath this, I have these fields which allow you to, for example, search on a specific employee. Or I can show all employees based within a certain job position. I can also define the interval of time that shows up. You'll notice down the main body here it shows 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. I can change that from 1 hour intervals to anywhere from 15 minutes to 4-hour intervals. So for example, if I did my scheduling within 15-minute increments, then it will break it off that way. I also have shift type. There are different types of shifts that you can apply within the scheduler. The default is shift, being a work shift. I can also schedule time off and vacation. You can also add to this list as well with additional shifts, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. Coming down to the main body, I have several tabs that are available here. The first one being Schedule. This is the base schedule that I'm working with. The next one over is Scheduled Shift Times. This is a slightly different representation of the information that shows up here. And this information allows you to kind of just summarize on a day-to-day basis for each person. The next one is Template. And within here I can define pre-existing templates. So for example, if my Friday nights are typically busy, I can set up templates to say I need so many bartenders, so many wait staff, so many kitchen staff on this given day, and I can apply it as a pre-structured template. And Forecast. Within Forecast, this will take pre-existing information, and from this it will allow you to build a forecast to say this is what you should have working on Wednesday of next week, for example. Coming back to the first tab, I have Schedule. Now on this, you'll see in the main body I have information such as the current date I'm working on. The next cell down is number of shifts per forecast, and that represents this row coming across here. Now this indicates the number of people who are currently working on a shift, and it compares it within this row to the average of the last 3 shifts. So for example, if I'm focusing, let's say, strictly on my managers. So here's a list of all my managers. And within here, if I have, let's say, 2 managers working, then on here it will show a 2 within, let's say, 6 a.m. The next number over will be the average of the last 3 shifts for 6 a.m. for managers specifically. And so if usually, for example, at 6 a.m. I have 3 managers working, then it will show a 2/3. If I have 1 manager working right now and it shows maybe a 1/2, that means that on average I usually have 2 managers working in that time slot. Underneath that we have a list of all the employees, and you'll see they're all listed alphabetically within here. If I want to source out a specific one, I can go up to the search field and search on a specific employee. Coming across to the next column, I have hours/pref, being the number of hours scheduled for this employee versus their preferred hours. Now you remember, for example, we took a look at Joe Driver and he prefers to work 40 hours per week. Right now he's scheduled to none. Now if I was to apply any kind of work time for him, then this number would change. So for example, I'm going to make Joe work from 12 p.m. until 2 p.m. So I do a click and drag on this, and then from this I will choose as selected. Now in this, what I've just done now is that I have applied a work shift for Joe. So he is now scheduled to work from 12 until 3 p.m. You'll notice within this, for example, I have number of shifts per forecast showing as a 1/0. Now this is because I don't have any historical data on this right now. But in here I have now scheduled one employee to work between 12 and 3. You'll also notice that within the hours/pref, he prefers to work 40 hours per week, and I have already scheduled him for 3 hours. The same can be applied, let's say, with Donald Duckworth. I can do a click and drag on him, and then within here as selected. And now he is scheduled to work. And if I was to overlap on any of these, for example, I have Emily, and I'm going to have her work from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You'll notice now that in these cells, it now shows as 2/0. That means that I have 2 employees working within these time slots. Also, over on the left, I have them both working 4 hours. The next column over is skill. And within the employee setup again, there was a field in there for their skill set. So when I'm applying my scheduling, I can now take a look at this and balance out my skilled employees with my non-skilled employees. Coming over to the main body, you'll also notice, for example, there are some red X's and some diagonal lines in green. The red X's represent the hours the employee states they cannot work. Those that show up with the green diagonal lines are hours they state that they prefer not to work. And those that show up blank are hours that they state they want to work. Now, as the employee scheduler, I can go in and I can still schedule these people to work. So for example, here I have Hannah, who states she cannot work at 9 o'clock, prefers not to work at 10 o'clock, and can work at 11. Now, if I select on as selected, the system will come up showing that she states that she cannot work. Do I wish to continue? As the scheduler, I can override that, and she will be working it nonetheless. Another way that you can go about applying these is to click and drag, and rather than go up to the top, just right click and you can select on Add Shift. You'll notice within here as well that there are some cells that show up in white and some cells that show up in gray. The white cells represent hours that the establishment is open. Those in gray are hours that the establishment is set to be closed. So within this, I can choose on an employee's time and I can have them work till close, and that will bring their time across to the closing time. Or if I come across to the next day, I can have someone work from open until a certain time. Again, just choose on the time to open, and it will show up in there. I can also change these shifts as well. So for example, I can take this and I can modify it. And within it, it will bring up this window. And in this, I can now change in terms of the exact time that I've set for this, the type of shift, and I can also change the wage for this given shift as well. So for example, if this is maybe on a Sunday or a Saturday, I may want to pay them a little extra for working on the weekend. I can also change the type of shift as well by selecting, for example, time off. And on this, if I now do a click and drag and as selected, it shows up in a different color coding indicating that this is time off. Or I can change it again for vacation time. Now, taking this information, I can come over to the next tab, which is Scheduled Shift Times. And within Scheduled Shift Times, you'll see within here I've got all of the information that I've just applied in here. Now on this, again, I can make a change to this by going in, selecting on that cell, and then from there, modify shift. Or I can double click on it and it will do the same thing. If I want to see the overall schedule for an employee, all I have to do is select on it and then show employee. And you'll see, for example, within Hannah, this is all of the shifts that I have her scheduled for within this given week. You can also view this by going to Hannah's name and double clicking. Coming back to the main tab, I can scan through each one of these days by selecting next day and previous day. And within all of that, you'll see down at the bottom here, I have some summary information. So for example, within this day, being August 26th, I have 5 shifts that are scheduled, a total of 18 hours. And it also pulls in the wage information as well and shows me here that my current day wages is $94. And the wage for this individual schedule is $94. Now on this, if I come up to this cell that says number of shifts per forecast, and if I double click on this, it will actually change over to a field called total wage. And on this, I can actually identify the wages that I'm paying on a per hour basis. Another function that resides within the system is copy schedule. Now, rather than recreate these schedules week after week, what I can do is I can select on copy schedule, and what this will do is copy all of the shifts from the previous period, being the previous scheduled work shift or last week, and it will bring them all into this current week. And then from there, I can just make appropriate changes for the current week. The next tab I have is template. Now within here, there are a number of different templates that already reside within the system, and you can set these up appropriately. When designing any one of these, go up to the very top menu and select on Schedule, Set Up Template. And within here, on any one of the different schedules, you can identify as far as the staff that you need for that given schedule. So for example, for Monday, I indicate that I need 3 wait staff, 2 cashiers, and 1 manager for that entire schedule. And I can edit on this, and I can also create new ones as well for very specific events. Now the one that shows up here right now is the Monday schedule. So you'll see within this, I have all of my job positions showing up, being the 3 wait staff, the 2 cashiers, and the 1 manager. Located over on the right hand side, I have all of the different people that can be applied to any given one. So for example, if I need a cashier, I have Jack and I have Kyle. And so I can say, for example, within this template, I want Jack to work, and I also want Kyle to work. And so for my Monday template, I have now set it up so I have my 2 cashiers that are required for this, and in this I populate it with my 2 cashiers, being Jack and Kyle. And so this is how you go about applying all of this, and you can change this around by selecting on the employee, and you can also remove them as well. Within any one of these, it will show up all of the staff that apply to that given job position. The next tab over is Forecast. Now again, I don't have any historical information on this, but what this will do is this will allow you to build a forecast based on past sales. And so within this, the system will look back at previous sales, let's say for example on a Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning or a Tuesday at 7 o'clock at night, and it will pull from that information based on the sales. So for example, for every $5,000 worth of sales, I had 3 wait staff working. And so the system will factor all of that in, saying, all right, so as long as your sales are roughly the same from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, one week to the next, then it will bring that across and it will apply it within here. So for example, in this case, it's been set up for systems administrator. I have 1 employee, and that's per $500 per hour. And that's what I have scheduled for this. Again, all of this is set up within Setup Forecast. And in this, you go in and you apply in terms of the hourly sales, or the sales based on each hour for each one of the different job positions that resided within it. A lot of this information would be set up by your installer or your programmer, so consult with them when setting all of this up. But with this done, then what you can do is you can build on your forecast, you can graph it out. Again, it's a very poor graph based on the data I have. And then within this, you can now forecast in terms of what you anticipate you will need for any given night. As far as further setup on all this, you'll see within the schedule pull-down menu we have, for example, load schedule. So I can actually load up another schedule. It will bring up that window and I can choose another week. As selected, till close, to open. The same as those that reside within the taskbar, or again, you can right-click on them. Modify and delete shifts. You select on a shift and then you can modify or delete them. Again, you can do that through here. Also, show employee shifts. That's the same as show employee, or where you double click on it to look at the shift for a specific employee. Set up shift types. Here we have shift being a work shift, vacation, and time off. And within this, you can schedule additional ones as well. For example, maybe working off-site, for example, at a different store. In setup, you may recall in a previous video, this information came up pertaining to when you designate the opening hours of the establishment, the closing hours of the establishment. Also, what is the first day of the week that will show up within any schedule that you select? Also, the number of days to load. By default, it's set to 7, which means that a schedule is 7 days, but you can make a schedule represent, for example, every 2 weeks or for an entire month. And the default interval that shows up being 1 hour, and that can be anywhere from 15 minutes to 4-hour intervals. Show skill indicator. If you want the skill set showing up within here, you can flag that as yes or no. And then payroll information. This identifies information corresponding with the pay periods. So for example, are your pay periods per week or bi-weekly or whatever? Also within this as well, the number of days that you want to allow editing prior to the end of that pay period. And when initially setting this up, what was the last pay period? So all of this information will be factored into it. And again, this is stuff that's all set up by your installer or programmer. Set up template, set up forecast, which we took a look at, and finally print, which will allow you to print the master schedule for all of the employees. And finally exit, which will exit you out of this scheduler.